Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everyone. Steve, are you excited for this Sunday's Super Bowl?
Yes, it is the Super Bowl, at least our Super Bowl, the Oscars.
It is indeed our Super Bowl, and we're really excited to share some of our favorite Oscar acceptance speeches.
And there's been so many incredible Oscar speeches over the years.
Yes.
It was so much fun. I think you felt the same way. Getting to go back and relive these Oscar speeches. Some of them I've never seen. Some of them are iconic.
Yes.
But it was so much fun. And so we picked out some really fun ones for you. And we're going to talk about who they were, who they beat, and why we loved their Oscar speech.
And let me tell you, I shed quite a few tears going through these speeches. I mean, there are some really moving speeches.
Absolutely. So many beautiful, emotional speeches. And one thing that I noticed, and I wish it would go back to this way, nowadays when somebody wins an Oscar, they thank their manager and their agent and their publicist and their hairstylist and their team and their blah. And they don't really say anything.
It's rare.
Whereas I think a lot, and some do, I mean, not everybody, but I think back in 30s, 40s, 50s, people didn't thank that litany of craftsmen. They tried to make a statement or say something meaningful or personal. And I love that and I miss that.
Yes. And I think they also had such a short amount of time to do it post Greer Garson's infamous speech.
Oh, Greer, she will just go down in history, won't she?
Because they only had 45 seconds. They really had to figure out what they wanted to say.
Yeah, make it count.
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't think people do that anymore. They don't make it count.
Well, let's dive in with one that is very famous, but it is one of the most moving speeches. In 1940, Gone with the Wind's Hattie McDaniel became the first African-American to ever win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. She was in competition with Olivia de Havilland for Gone with the Wind, Geraldine Fitzgerald for Wuthering Heights, Edna Mae Oliver for Drums Along the Mohawk, and Maria Ospinskaya for Love Affair.
Tight competition.
Hattie McDaniel was almost not allowed to attend the ceremony. The awards took place at the Ambassador Hotel.
Which was restricted, right?
Yes, it was segregated at the time. David O. Selznick, the producer of Gone with the Wind, had to ask the hotel for permission to invite Hattie McDaniel.
Ugh.
Which they gave.
Yeah.
But Hattie McDaniel was relegated to a separate table away from her white co-stars.
Oh, that's so wrong.
And yet, given this, let's face it, racist treatment, she gives one of the most moving speeches in Oscar history. Let's listen.
Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science, fellow members of the motion picture industry, and honored guests. This is one of the happiest moments of my life. And I want to thank each one of you who had a part in selecting me for one of the awards. For your kindness, it has made me feel very, very humble. And I shall always hold it as a beacon for anything that I may be able to do in the future. I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel. And may I say thank you, and God bless you.
Faye Bainter presented the award to Hattie McDaniel, and her speech in part read, "It's more than just a plaque of gold." Remember, back in the day, supporting actors
they didn't get
got
the
a plaque.
full Oscar.
They didn't get a statuette. It opens the doors of this room, moves back the walls, and enables us to embrace the whole of America.
Wow, how beautiful.
Now, it would be 25 years before another black actor would win the Academy Award. In 1964, Sidney Poitier receives the award for Best Actor. In his speech, he talks about the long journey to this moment. 38 years after that, in 2002, he receives an honorary Academy Award where he describes a time in which the odds against my standing here tonight would not have fallen in my favor. And he closes his speech by saying, "I accept this award in memory of all the African-American actors and actresses who went before me in the difficult years, on whose shoulders I was privileged to stand to see where I might go."
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
And it makes you also think that same year, I believe, Halle Berry also became
She
the
did.
very first African-American woman to win Best Actress. And when you hear Hattie McDaniel's speech, it really informs the emotion that Halle Berry felt when she honored all the people from her past whose shoulders she had,
Yes.
stepped upon to get there. And it's a beautiful full circle moment.
And the fact that it took until 2002 is shameful.
Shameful. One of the Oscar speeches that I like, and we're going to lighten it up a little bit, is I love the Oscar speech that Claire Trevor gave when she won Best Supporting Actress for Key Largo in 1949. That year, she was up against some pretty formidable competition. She had Barbara Bel Geddes and Ellen Corby, both from I Remember Mama, Agnes Moorehead from Johnny Belinda, don't ever count out Agnes, and then Gene Simmons from Hamlet. I mean, really great competition, but it was Claire's year. She won, deservedly so. And when she goes on stage, she gives this really great, big theatrical bow to the audience. I love that. I thought that's really classy. But then after she was telling the usual, this is one of the happiest moments of her life, she goes on to say that she has 3 sons and she hopes that they grow up to be either directors or writers so that they can give their old lady a job.
Oh, I love that.
It's adorable. And it's actually on YouTube if you want to see it.
That's wonderful. Well, the Academy Awards in 1942 almost didn't take place. These were the awards that were almost canceled on the heels of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the United States entry into World War II. James Stewart and Donald Crisp wore military uniforms to the event.
Oh, I
You
love
might
that.
also remember this is the year that How Green Was My Valley famously beat Citizen Kane for Best Picture.
And people still squawk about it.
They do. Donald Crisp received the Academy Award as Best Supporting Actor. Pretty stiff competition that year as well. Walter Brennan for Sergeant York, Charles Coburn, The Devil and Miss Jones, James Gleason, Here Comes Mr. Jordan, and Sidney Greenstreet, Maltese Falcon.
Wow.
Crisp was 58 years old when he received his Oscar. His first film credit was in 1908. So by the time of this nomination, he had amassed nearly 200 film credits in silence and shorts and feature-length films. So what I love about his speech is that he advocates for other older actors. He says, "I think there's quite a lot of the old-timers knocking around that could do justice to some of that, and some of you wonderful producers will look at some of these old-timers and give them a chance. There's a lot of good blood there." And then he added, "And I do want to say that my little friend Barbara Stanwyck has been rehearsing me all week. She's handed me every lamp and statue on the set."
Oh, that's fantastic.
And he did give a fabulous performance in
And
that film.
he did. And good for him for advocating for the older character actors.
Yes, amen to that.
Well, my next speech, and it's another one I just love, and it is from Ernest Borgnine when he won for Marty in the 1955 Oscars. Again, he was up, crazy competition. James Cagney for Love Me or Leave Me, James Dean, East of Eden, Frank Sinatra, The Man with a Golden Arm, and Spencer Tracy, Bad Day at Black Rock. But if anybody's ever seen Ernest Borgnine's performance in Marty, you can understand why he won this award. He's so wonderful and tender and gruff and all the things that Ernest Borgnine is so wonderful at portraying.
Yes. It's really his role.
Oh,
never to be
It was like
done by
tailor-made
anybody
for him.
else.
Well, I think he did the telepicture version
He
before
did.
this. So,
Yeah.
well, at that Oscars, when Grace Kelly announces that he's the winner, he seems genuinely surprised. I love his reaction at the seat, because he was going out some stiff competition, and I think he knew it. But he gives a very emotional and very sweet speech. And it's not that what he said was so phenomenal, but it's just the fact that he got so emotional when he was saying it. And you don't think of Ernest Borgnine as being a vulnerable, emotional fella, but he was. And you can hear it in his voice, you can hear it in his throat, you can see just the genuine joy of getting to accept this award.
Yeah.
And he thanked his mom for encouraging him to go into acting, even though no one thought he could. And he thanked his pop for being so steadfast and true. And then he thanked his lovely wife. It was so moving, so unexpected from such a big, brawny, buff guy. But I love his speech.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. Well, in 1947, Celeste Holm takes home the supporting actress Oscar for Gentleman's Agreement.
And you know how I feel about that.
Well, I know.
She stole it from Anne Revere.
She did.
But that's
steal
another
it from
that's
Anne
another
Revere.
episode.
No, that competition, aside from Anne Revere, who was in Gentleman's Agreement as well, Marjorie Main as Ma Kettle
That's
in
right.
The Egg and I.
That's right.
Ethel Barrymore as Lady Sophie Horfield in The Paradigm Case, and Gloria Graham, who was in Crossfire that year, playing Ginny Tremaine.
And so good.
So good, yeah. So Celeste Holm gives a beautiful speech, and the thing I love about it is, as y'all recall, Gentleman's Agreement is about anti-Semitism, and what I like about what she says is she calls attention to the fact that this film is important, and part of her speech reads, "Thank you, everybody, for making this happen. I am very proud to be a member of an industry which can promote so much understanding in a world which seems to need it so much."
Oh, beautiful words.
So I really love that.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. The next Oscar speech that I wanted to talk about, and this one's just fun. It's just really funny. And it's when Yul Brynner won for The King and I at the 1957 Oscar ceremony. Again, he was up against James Dean for Giant, Kirk Douglas, Lust for Life, Rock Hudson, also Giant, and Sir Laurence Olivier for Richard III.
Wow.
So, stiff competition. Well, when Anna Magnani announces that Yul is the winner, he strides down that aisle with such confidence and so elegant. I just love watching him. It's like it was his destiny.
Yes.
This was meant to be.
All right.
So he takes the podium and he just cuts to the chase in the funniest way. And I won't do it justice. So let's listen to the clip.
Great.
I hope this is not a mistake, because I won't give it back for anything in the world. Thank you very much.
Now, that's the way to give an acceptance speech. And I think he meant it. Like, he's not giving that sucker back.
Right.
Very, very funny. And I love that's all he said.
Yeah.
Like, concise, funny, to the point. Keep it moving.
Yes. You mentioned elegance. The clips that I watched from 30s, 40s, 50s, even into the early 60s, the ceremonies, the presenters, the whole way the show was done had such elegance.
Yes.
Even to the point where when a presenter was announced and they would come out on stage, they would give a little bow to the audience. The orchestra playing, the tails, all the men had tails.
Oh, and the beautiful gowns on the women. And, now at the Oscars, and I hate to admit this, I'm getting older, I guess, but, sometimes we'll see the presenters and I'm like, who in the hell are these people? So there's that.
Well, in 1949, some people might have been questioning who the person was that won for that year because she was brand new. We talked about her in an episode.
Yes.
First timer. Mercedes McCambridge wins for All the King's Men, Best Supporting Actress.
And so justifiable. She's so good.
Well, and she was up against Ethel Barrymore in Pinky, Celeste Holm, again, Come to the Stable, one of my favorite films, Elsa Lanchester, Come to the Stable, and Ethel Waters in Pinky.
Wow.
And I'm going to let her speak for herself. Here is her speech.
I'm aware of those who have contributed to this moment and thankful for them. But I would like to say to every waiting actor, hold on. Look what can happen. Thank you very much.
I'm a sucker for a speech that encourages any actor at any age to hang on for dear life.
I love that. Hang on. Look what can happen.
Right.
That was a great speech and a great performance. All right. My next Oscar speech that I wanted to talk about was the incredible Burt Lancaster when he won for Elmer Gantry at the 1961 Oscar ceremony. That year, he was up against Trevor Howard for Sons and Lovers, Jack Lemmon, The Apartment, Sir Laurence Olivier, The Entertainer, and the great Spencer Tracy in Hair at the Wind. end. And I think a lot of people thought it was a two-man race that year. They thought it's either going to be Burt Lancaster or it's going to be Spencer Tracy. Well, Burt ended up being the chosen one, as Greer Garson announced. And so Burt, when he won, he calmly gets out of his seat, and he's sporting some very groovy, thick glasses too, a la Buddy Holly, and looking very sharp.
Good, yeah.
Yeah. And so he gets up, he slowly makes his way to the stage. He thanks Greer Garson for telling him under her breath that she thought his win was richly deserved. He said, "That's very nice of you, Greer." And then he goes on to give kind of a basic speech where he thanks the members of the Academy who voted for him. And then he stops and he gets this little twinkle in his eye and he says with a laugh, and I love this, he goes, "And right now I feel so happy that I want to thank all the members of the Academy who did not vote for me." The audience ate it up. Everybody laughed heartily. It was just one of those great moments. And that was it. He was gone.
I love it.
That's the way to do a speech.
Well, at that same ceremony in 1961, Gary Cooper receives an honorary Oscar for his many memorable screen performances over his career. Cooper had garnered 5 nominations in total with 2 wins, one for Sergeant York in 1941 and one for High Noon in 1952. Jimmy Stewart accepts the honorary Oscar for Gary Cooper. Stewart had given Gary Cooper his first Oscar when he won for Sergeant York. Unfortunately, Cooper is too ill to attend. The year prior, he had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer that eventually moved to his lungs and his bones. And Jimmy Stewart, it just makes me weepy thinking about it. Fighting back tears, he gives such a beautiful speech.
I'm very honored to accept this award for Gary Cooper. I'm only sorry that he isn't here tonight to accept it in person. But I know that he's sitting beside his television set tonight. So, Coop, I'll get this to you right away. And, Coop, I want you to know this, that with this goes all the warm friendship and the affection and the admiration and the deep respect of all of us. We're very, very proud of you, Coop. All of us are tremendously proud.
Gary Cooper died a month later, on May 13th, 1961.
Wow.
At the age of 60.
Oh, it makes it so much more poignant now that you know he passed away so quickly after.
Yes. It's time for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
So our pop quiz question of the week, of course, is going to be Oscar speech related. And we all know that Greer Garson gave the longest acceptance speech in the history of the Oscars for her Best Actress win for Mrs. Miniver. Just how long was it? That's the question.
We will be right back with the answer and more of our favorite Oscar speeches after this.
Hey, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Root around the history of Hollywood, and you won't find too many stars with a cleaner, more wholesome reputation than Jimmy Stewart. But Mark Elliott, author of a previously acclaimed biography of Cary Grant, says the notoriously tyrannical MGM boss Louis B. Mayer was so concerned about the young Stewart's apparent lack of interest in women, he forced Stewart to visit a brothel so people wouldn't start gossiping that Stewart was gay. Now remember, this was an era when actors and their reputation were effectively owned by the studios. Studios held their contracts and the actors were subject to extraordinary manipulations. In fact, studios such as MCA would even run interference when necessary. MCA successfully covered up Clark Gable's drunk driving arrests and Bette Davis's apparent participation in the manslaughter death of her second husband. In fact, in the 1950s, studio publicists played up Montgomery Clift's friendships with theater actresses rather than acknowledge that he was gay. Same thing they'd done previously with Cary Grant's 5 marriages. That was to deflect attention from that beach house that Grant shared with fellow actor Randolph Scott. But when Jimmy Stewart was just 25, Louis B. Mayer owned a private brothel just off of the MGM lot. It was a discreet place where talent could misbehave in the secure knowledge that word wouldn't reach gossip columnists and entertainment tabloids. Now, Stewart, of course, was not gay or even bisexual. In fact, as his career progressed, he had affairs with both Loretta Young and Marlene Marlena Dietrich. And as you know, Stewart settled down at age 40 with divorced socialite Gloria McLean, with whom he lived happily for the rest of his life. So take that, Louis B. Mayer. And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we get back into sharing some wonderful Oscar speeches in honor of the Academy Awards coming up, we wanted to honor a new listener of the week. It's Graham Clark. Thank you so much for your email, Graham. We're so glad that you found our podcast and that you enjoy it so much. And we just really appreciate you listening and all your wonderful comments.
Thanks, Graham. All right, so we're getting back to some Oscar speeches. And of course, these are just mine and Nan's favorites. It's all subjective, so just if we don't say your favorite, don't send us a nasty email. Anyway, these were just, for whatever reason, they resonated with us, and they're just fun to talk about. And my next one, and I love this so much, it is Rita Moreno when she won Best Supporting Actress in West Side Story at the 1962 Oscar ceremony. She was up against Faye Bainter, who we just talked about for The Children's Hour, Judy Garland, Judgment at Nuremberg, Lotte Lenya for The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone, and Una Merkel, Summer and Smoke. Some great actresses there.
Yes, yes.
But it was Rita's year, and she became the very first Latina Oscar winner.
Yes.
Which is historic. So when Rock Hudson announces that she's the winner, she screams with delight, which is so fun to watch. She hugs her seatmate, which is also her co-star, George Chakiris, who had just previously won an Oscar himself for West Side Story. And then she runs to the stage, almost like this joyful young girl, so much fun to watch. And she just says incredulously, "I can't believe it. Good Lord." I leave you with that. And she laughed. So as you can see, I like the short and sweet ones.
Yes.
But it was just very sweet. It was very emotional. And you could really see the surprise on her face.
Yes.
And I don't know that it really resonated with her that she had made Oscar history at that moment. But in hindsight, it was a really pivotal moment for the Oscars.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, the dress that she had on that night, she wore again recently, a couple years ago.
And surprisingly, I just read this, Mattel has a Rita Moreno Barbie doll, and she's in that Oscar dress.
I want one.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That's very cool. Well, my next speech, it's the 1972 Oscar ceremony, and it's kind of remarkable. It's Charlie Chaplin receiving his honorary award. The award reads, "To Charles Chaplin for the incalculable effect he has had in making motion pictures, the art form of this century." There is an entire book, probably multiple books, written about what happened to Charlie Chaplin. But to put it in a nutshell, he was smeared in the press, labeled a communist, and not allowed to return to the United States for 20 years. So his honorary Oscar win is really a welcoming back.
Yeah, don't you think it's sort of a mea culpa from the industry?
I think so. Charlie Chaplin's reception is the longest standing ovation in the history of the Academy Awards at 12 minutes long. And you can watch not all 12 minutes of it because they've cut it down, but you can watch it on YouTube, and it's really moving. And he is so incredibly gracious. Let's just listen to what he says in response to that.
Words seem so futile, so feeble. I can only say that thank you for the honor of inviting me here, and you're wonderful, sweet people. Thank you.
In addition to the statuette, the Academy also gave him a hat like the tramp used to wear.
Oh, like the bowler hat?
Yeah, and a cane.
Oh, that's so appropriate. So
Yes.
cool. It's the least they could do.
Right?
Well, from that very same Oscar ceremony, the 1972 ceremony, comes my next Oscar speech.
Oh.
And it was the incredible, I love this actor so much, Ben Johnson, who won Best Supporting Actor for The Last Picture Show. Again, stiff competition. He was up against Jeff Bridges, also for The Last Picture Show, and Leonard Frey for Fiddler on the Roof, Richard Jackal for Sometimes a Great Notion, and Roy Scheider for The French Connection. So when he's announced as the winner, Ben Johnson, he covers his face with his hands, then he rises from his seat, and then he raises his hands up, almost like in this victory pounce, which was really great, and I loved it. And so he makes his way to the podium, and Sally Kellerman hands him the Oscar, and the first thing he says, he looks at it and he says, "Well, ain't that purty?" In that iconic Oklahoma drawl of his.
Right.
And it was very funny and very sweet. But he goes on to give kind of a traditional Oscar speech. He thanks the usual suspects, Peter Bogdanovich and the cast and the crew and Columbia Pictures, etc. But then at the very end, he gets very still and he gets very serious. And he says that what he's about to say will likely give folks something to talk about in the coming days. And he wanted everyone across the world to think about this. And what did he say?
What did he say?
Well, let's let Ben talk about it.
Okay.
Let's play the clip.
And now what I'm about to say probably will stir up a lot of conversation around over the country. There's something I'd like to leave in everyone's mind throughout the world. This couldn't have happened to a nicer feller. Thank you.
Well, that is the way to accept an Oscar right there. Good for you, Ben Johnson.
Well, that's a great segue into two quick acceptance speeches that I want to talk about. The first one is from 1969's ceremony where Ruth Gordon famously wins Best Supporting Actress for Rosemary's Baby. She's up against Lynn Carlin in Faces, Sandra Locke in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, Kay Medford in Funny Girl, and Estelle Parsons in Rachel. And by the way, when they cut to those ladies, ooh, they are so serious. They're like, who's gonna win?
Even Sandra? I don't remember.
Sandra looked really nervous.
Well, she was her first movie, I'm sure.
Very
Yeah.
young. Well, Ruth Gordon is the winner, and she runs up to the stage in this delightful pink frock, and she gives the following speech.
I can't tell you how encouraging a thing like this is. The first film that I was ever in was in 1915, and here we are, and it's 1969. Actually, I don't know why it took me so long, though I don't think, that I'm backward. Anyway, thank you, Bill, thank you, Bob, thank you, Roman, and thank you, Mia, and thank all of you who voted for me, and all of you who didn't, please excuse me.
It's classic, right?
Oh, one of my favorites.
Who doesn't love that one? Well, at the same ceremony, Mel Brooks, not to be outdone, he receives the Academy Award for writing story and screenplay written directly for the screen for the producers, up against Battle of Algiers, Faces, Hot Millions, and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Wow, I can't believe it beat 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes. Well, the award is presented by Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles, and that's a whole nother shtick. Right there.
Oh, I can imagine.
But Mel Brooks gets up and he starts going through his pockets in his tuxedo coat looking for his speech and saying, I wrote something down here. I didn't want to rely on my memory. He can't seem to find his speech. And then he says this.
I want to thank the Academy of Arts, Sciences, and Money for this wonderful award. Well, I'll just say what's in my heart. Ba-bump, 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 ba-bump.
Look at that. And he won an honorary Oscar, I believe it was 2 years ago.
That's right. That's such a great speech.
Yes.
So Mel Brooks.
Yes, it is.
He had us all fooled.
He did.
Sure, you've lost your speech.
He's a good actor.
He was very good. Well, my next speech, and it's from the 1975 Oscar ceremony, and this was when Ingrid Bergman won Best Supporting Actress for Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh.
She was up against Valentina Corteza for Day for Night, Madeline Kahn, Blazing Saddles, Diane Ladd, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and Talia Shire for The Godfather Part 2.
Oh.
Great performances.
Yes.
Well, this one is such a beautiful moment that I just love it. When Peter Falk and Catherine Ross announce that she's the winner,
yes,
she's sitting in her seat. She almost looks upset that she won. Mind you, this is her third win. She'd already won for Gaslight, Anastasia, and now this. So maybe she was thinking, spread the wealth. This is too much. People are going to hate me. But you can almost physically see it on her face, which I thought was interesting. And she's wonderful in Murder on the Orient Express. Don't get me wrong, but it clearly wasn't a challenging role like she's delivered in the past. Casablanca and Notorious and so many great movies. And anybody who's ever seen Valentina Cortese playing the Italian actress diva in Day for Night probably knows that that Oscar should have gone to her. Well, Ingrid knew it too.
Oh.
And this is such a generous, lovely, gracious moment that in her speech, she acknowledges Valentina in such a beautiful way. Rather than me try to recreate it, let's play the clip.
Great.
Thank you very much indeed. It's always very nice to get an Oscar. But in the past, he has shown that he is very forgetful and also has the wrong timing. Because last year, when Day and Night won for the Best Picture, I couldn't believe it that Valentina Cortese was not nominated, because she gave the most beautiful performance. She gave the most beautiful performance that all we actors is recognized, because after all, we have all forgotten our lines and always opened the wrong doors, and it was wonderful to see her do it so beautifully. Therefore, it's so ironic that this year she's nominated. When the picture won last year, I don't quite understand that, but here I am, and I'm her rival. And I don't like it at all. Please forgive me, Valentina. I didn't mean to. Thank you.
I don't know there's ever been a lovelier moment between two incredible actresses acknowledging each other's talent and gifts. It's such a beautiful thing. Sadly, Valentina Cortese never won an Oscar, and she went on to do many, many wonderful movies. And I particularly love her in one of my favorite film noirs from earlier, Thieves Highway.
Oh, yes.
But, she never got her Oscar love, but she got love from Ingrid.
Yeah, and we're loving on her now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about 3 different speeches real quickly. This idea that film and the art that we create, how it can influence the world. And when you start looking at the speeches in the 60s,
yes,
the speeches really start to reflect that. The first is Abby Mann winning writing screenplay based on material from another medium for judgment at Nuremberg. When he gets up, he says, "A few years ago, I retired to a room on 58th Street in New York. And I retired there with some legal records of the Third Reich. And I went there because I believe that a writer who's worth his salt at all has an obligation not only to entertain, but to comment on the world in which he lives. Not only to comment, but to maybe have a shot at reshaping that world."
Wow.
Which I think is what art, when it's done well, whether it's film or television or theater, it does it like nothing else can.
And I love that he took that opportunity and that platform to spread that message.
Yes. And at the 1967 Oscar ceremony, Haskell Wexler, who wins for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf for cinematography, he had a very simple speech and said, "I hope we can use our art for peace and for love. Thanks." And then the following year, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, just days before the Academy Award ceremony. Hal Ashby wins for film editing in the heat of the night, and his words are, "To repeat the words of a very dear friend of mine last year when he picked up his Oscar, I only hope that we can use all of our talents and creativity towards peace and love." And then 2 more very quickly at that same award ceremony. Think about how emotional that must have been with Dr. King having just been assassinated.
I'm sure their emotions were so raw in that room.
And in the heat of the night, being kind of the film of that year, Rod Steiger gets up and says, "Most importantly, I'd like to thank Mr. Sidney Poitier for the pleasure of his friendship, which gave me the knowledge and understanding of prejudice in order to enhance my performance. Thank you, and we shall overcome."
Wow.
Which is so powerful.
So powerful, especially in the context of the times.
Yeah. Gregory Peck, in that same ceremony, goes on to receive the Jean Hersholt Award. He uses it as a platform to encourage people for their humanitarian efforts of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with its nonviolent approach to what he describes as the most pressing problems, and to encourage people to give contributions to the Martin Luther King Jr. Fund in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so I think each of those people and everyone at the award ceremony that year was really advocating for change, and it was a real moment, I think, in the history.
Yes, absolutely. For my final Oscar speech, and I saved the best for last for myself personally. This is my favorite Oscar speech in the history of the Oscars.
Oh.
It's so good. And a lot of you will know it. But when Barbara Stanwyck, who you all know is probably my favorite actress of all time, hands down.
Me too.
She was Oscar nominated 4 times for Stella Dallas in 1938, Ball of Fire 1942, Double Indemnity 1944, and Sorry, Wrong Number 1949. And she should have been nominated for Babyface in 1933, Golden Boy 1939, Remember the Night 1940, The Lady Eve 1941, Meet John Doe 1941, and Clash by Night 1952. But she wasn't, but that's another episode. However, she never won a competitive Oscar, and I know we hound this all the time.
We do. We hammer it, but it's worth hammering.
But it's just surprising. So finally, the good people of the Academy got the bright idea to give her a special Oscar based on her body of work, which is so deserved. Well, the night of the ceremony, 1982 ceremony, when John Travolta gets up there, he sets the tone, and he tells the audience that 4 years prior, Stanwyck and her very dear friend William Holden had taken the Oscar stage as presenters. And when they get up there, William Holden departs from the script and he starts speaking from his heart. And he tells the audience that night how he owes his entire career to Barbara Stanwyck's belief in him. And he was likely referring to, in his very first leading role in Golden Boy, he almost got fired. And Barbara Stanwyck said, if you fire that boy, I will not do this movie. And William Holden really, till the day he died, said, I would have no career without Barbara Stanwyck. And they had such a beautiful friendship. Well, Barbara didn't know he was going to say that. Apparently, she was so overwrought with emotion by him just speaking from the heart. So, cut to Barbara's getting her special Oscar in 1982. By this time, William Holden has tragically passed. And, you know, you can feel the absence. So, when Barbara gets up to accept her own special Oscar, she spoke from her heart and she spoke about him. And I could never do her speech justice, especially the part about him. So let's just listen to the clip.
A few years ago, I stood on the stage with William Holden as a presenter. I loved him very much and I miss him. He always wished that I would get an Oscar. And so tonight, my golden boy, you got your wish.
That speech still makes me tear up to this day.
It does me too.
The emotion in her voice and just, it's just perfection.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
My last one is not really about the speech from the winner. It's about the speech that the presenters gave before they gave out the Oscar.
I love this.
Yes. Now, this one is at the 1969 ceremony for celebrating films from 1968. 5 talented actresses get up to present the award for Best Director. The films that were nominated for Best Direction were The Battle of Algiers, The Lion in Winter, Oliver, Romeo and Juliet, and 2001, A Space Odyssey. So 5 actresses are lined up on stage: Natalie Wood, Ingrid Bergman, Jane Fonda, Diane Carroll, and Rosalind Russell.
That is quite a lineup.
Yes. And they each have something very particular and very powerful to say about the award they're about to give. Let's listen.
We are assembled here somewhat reluctantly to make the next award,
which is for Best Achievement in Directing.
This year, the nominated directors have done their best to make female stars obsolete.
Only one of the 4 even had a lady star in his picture, and that was Lion in Winter.
The female lead in Romeo and Juliet was a teenage newcomer.
The biggest female part in Oliver sang 2 songs and got choked for her troubles.
And the only female in Battle of Algiers were extras wearing veils and old army blankets.
The only girlish thing about 2001: A Space Odyssey was a computer with a noticeable lisp.
Wow.
Nobody's making those female stars obsolete, right?
Indeed. And good for the ladies there.
And good for them. Carol Reed, of course, would go on to win the award for Best Director for Oliver. Well, there are so many more that we could talk about. I think what is so interesting about watching these speeches over this past week preparing for the episode, you're watching people's dreams come true.
Yeah.
And I've been asking myself, why do I get so emotional about somebody winning an Oscar 50 years ago? Or even, why do we get emotional about somebody winning it this coming Sunday?
Yeah.
And it's because I think we each still have within us this idea, not maybe to win an Oscar, but that somehow what we're doing matters.
Yes.
And can have an impact.
Yes. And it's just, you get to create art and you're recognized for it.
Yes.
That's a rare thing, and it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's what we all strive for.
Right, and it's what we need so much right now during this time.
Yes.
Let's give the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
Well, the question was, we all know Greer Garson gave the longest acceptance speech in the history of the Oscars. Just how long was that sucker? And you know, urban legend has said that it was an hour. It was not. It actually was almost 7 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot until you have to listen to someone speak for 7 minutes.
Yes, exactly. And you can find portions of it on Oscars.org, the website for the Academy, which has been so helpful in this week's episode. We just have to give them a shout out.
Yes. And I love that you can go in their site and read the transcripts of the speeches, which is really nice.
Well, thanks everyone for spending this time with us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review. And if you would follow us on social media, we can keep you updated on future episodes. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign, and you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube.
And let us know your favorite Oscar speeches. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's View.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.